Now we will be dealing with the actual functioning of the President of India. President, who is the constitutional head of the state in India, is the repository of entire executive power of the Union government, which he can exercise directly or indirectly through its officers. However, in the practical functioning of the nation, we will find that direct exercise of the powers by the President of India is not that easy. He has to rely on the bureaucracy, and indirectly through its officers, it is how he is going to execute his parts. So now we will see how actually the President of India functions. So Article 74 Clause 1 is one such crucial article which speaks about the actual functioning of the President of India. 74 Clause 1 says that the President of India can act only with the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers in discharge of all of his functions. So here the keywords are only, aid and advice, Council of Ministers, discharge of all of his functions. So here we will see that the Article 74 Clause 1 limits the discretion of the President of India. How? We will see now. The President can act only, that is, he doesn't have much discretion to act in his individual judgment, but he can only act on the aid and advice. So the aid which has been given and the advice which has been given by the Council of Ministers in discharge of all of his functions. So all the functions and powers and authorities which we have seen can be exercised only by the President and only upon the advice as given by the Council of Ministers from time to time. For example, he wants to declare war. So first, the Council of Ministers should recommend to the President that he can declare the war, or he can appoint someone as the General of Army, for instance. So he has to take the approval, aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and when they recommend, then he can appoint him as the General of the Army. So there is not much individual judgment which is conferred upon the President of India. It has been purposefully made to ensure that the President of India doesn't become an authoritarian ruler or a dictator within the existing political system. So in order to make him only figurehead or approving authority, the Constitution has severely restricted his discretion. Now, if he doesn't listen, what will happen? Now, if he doesn't listen, the President of India will be held guilty of violation of the Constitution, which will open the grounds for impeachment of the President of India by the Parliament of India. Now, however, the Constitution gives a very limited discretion upon the President of India. What kind of discretion does it confer upon the President of India? That is, appointment of Prime Minister. Say for instance, there is a situation where the general elections to the Lok Sabha had happened recently, and no party is having clear-cut majority. So if there is a full majority or clear-cut majority in favor of any party or any kind of coalition, then the President of India will have to invite the leader of that coalition or that single largest party to form the government and to become the Prime Minister. But if in the case that no party gets a clear-cut majority, then in that particular situation only he can use his discretion. Only then he can use his discretion. If there is a case where there is a single largest party or single largest coalition, then here also the discretion is severely restricted. So it can happen only when no party secures a clear-cut majority in the House. Then where the incumbent PM dies. So what happens if the sitting PM dies? In that particular situation, to ensure that there is no gap in the government, the President can appoint someone as the Prime Minister to act as a caretaker Prime Minister till the party elects its leader who can who can stake to form the government. So here in this kind of situation where the PM dies, then the President can ask someone to act as the acting PM. Then dissolution of Lok Sabha when the ruling party loses no confidence motion. So, no confidence motion is one of the essential attributes of the parliamentary democracy. We will see that the Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha, and where the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, that is both the houses of parliament, and if the opposition members lose their confidence, they will obviously propose a resolution for no confidence motion, and when no confidence motion is passed against the government, then the Council of Ministers have no other choice but to resign. But if they don't resign, what can be done? What can be done? So, in that particular grey area, it is the President of India who has to take the call and who can direct what has to be done next. Then, the term of the President of India. When we see the term of the President of India, he can hold office for a term of 5 years. So, once he is elected as the President of India, from the date of him taking or her taking the oath, you have 5 years time period, and he can be re-elected. Unlike American President, where he cannot be elected for more than 2 terms, India there is no restriction. So, therefore, technically a person who has completed 5 years in his presidency or who has been a president can be re-elected to that particular office for n number of times, and he holds office till the successor president assumes the office. So, here there is a technicality, that is, there shall be a President of India. When the Constitution itself says that there shall be a President of India, it means that it does not envisage a situation of interregnum, that is, vacancy in that particular chair. So, there shall be a president. For instance, the president dies, then the vice president will act as the president. Or if the president loses the election, then he will continue till the successor president takes over. So, the Constitution clearly says or gives a picture that there will not be any kind of interregnum, or else, in other words, you can say there will not be any kind of vacancy in the office of the president. Someone will be there to discharge the office of the president. Then, resignation. He can resign. The President of India can resign by giving his resignation in writing to the Vice President. So, since President of India himself is the highest authority, there is no other person higher than the President of India to give the resignation. So, therefore, he gives the resignation or hands over his resignation letter to the Vice President. Then, the office of the President can become vacant if he has been impeached. Now, here comes the actual technicality of impeachment. Now, what is meant by impeachment? Impeachment is a process whereby the sitting President can be removed through a resolution passed by both the houses of the Parliament. Now, here we have to see what is impeachment. In a constitutional democracy, we will find that the constitutional head of the state, more popularly the President of India in our case, enjoys the support of the government or enjoys the support of the Council of Ministers who have been directly elected by the people. But in the long run, there was also a chance that what happens if the President turns authoritarian, or if he is not in good terms with the Council of Ministers and thereby takes any kind of action which is violative of the constitutional provisions, what is going to happen? That is the question. So, the Constitution itself says that the President of India can be impeached from his office through something called as impeachment motion. Now, we will see what is meant by impeachment motion. So, Article 61 speaks about impeachment. Article 61 speaks about impeachment. It says that the President of India can be impeached for violation of the Constitution. So, here the term is there, violation of the Constitution. But, however, the Constitution of India nowhere defines what amounts to the violation of the Constitution. It may be any kind of decision which is against the mandate of the Constitution. It can be any decision which can be against the mandate of the Constitution, or which may be against the stipulations as laid down in the Constitution. So, those kind of stipulations can be treated as violation of the Constitution. And impeachment motion, how it is done. First, there should be a resolution which has been moved in the either house of parliament. So, either houses of the parliament, either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, can first pass the resolution for impeachment. However, as soon as the resolution is placed, 1/4 of the members should sign the resolution. Once the 1/4 members of that particular house sign the resolution, then that particular resolution will be adopted, and that particular resolution should pass through 2/3 majority of each house. So, once that particular resolution has been passed through that particular house, then it will be placed before the other house, and there also it should pass with 2/3 majority. Then only that impeachment resolution is successful, and as soon as the impeachment resolution has been passed by both the houses, then the president stands removed from his office. Now, this resolution, how it is moved, that we will see. The first one is, charges are framed by one house and investigated by the other. Say for instance, there is one particular candidate, say President X. Now that President X has committed some sort of violation of the constitution. So, the resolution for the impeachment of the president has been moved in the Rajya Sabha. For instance, it can be moved in Lok Sabha also. So, once it has been moved in Rajya Sabha, then the 1/4 of the members should sign, or the 1/4 majority is required for adopting that particular resolution, to give a thought to that particular resolution. Once it has been done, then what happens is, and once the charges are framed, that is, the allegations are levelled against the President of India, 14-day notice is given to him, that is, so and so charges are framed against you, and you are supposed to answer those charges. And after receiving that particular reply, this particular resolution is put to vote before the Rajya Sabha. And if the Rajya Sabha, the 2/3 majority of the Rajya Sabha says yes, then that resolution will be taken to the next house, that is the Lok Sabha. And the Lok Sabha will conduct investigation into that particular charges. It will investigate whether the president, the allegations levelled against the president are in fact truth or not. So, in conducting the investigations, it can direct any particular court, or it can direct any particular authorities or bodies, investigating agencies, to look into the prospects of investigation. So, once the investigation is done, and if the second house finds that he is guilty of all those particular allegations, then it will pass a resolution by 2/3 majority impeaching the president, or resolution that he be removed from his chair. So, if it has been passed by 2/3 majority, then on the date of passing of that particular resolution, the president stands removed. He stands removed from that particular office. So, this procedure is somewhat complicated. It is not that easy, but nevertheless it can be done. But till now, no president has been ever impeached in the country, and usually it cannot be done. Why? Because president is the office of highest dignity, honor and prestige. So, a person holding such kind of office will not commit any kind of violation of the constitution. It is not that easy for a president to commit any such kind of violation, or thereby tarnishing the image of the presidential office. So, no candidate has ever done, and no candidate may do so in the future. So, such kind of situation, the constitution also has the provisions for the impeachment. So, impeachment of president is not that easy. However, one thing you should remember is, for the purpose of election of the President of India, you have elected MPs of both the houses as well as elected MLAs who will vote for a candidate for him to become the president. But when it comes to the removal, only the members of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, including the nominated members, they have a say in impeachment motion. So, that is where the difference lies in the election and impeachment of the President of India when it comes to the composition of the persons. Electoral college, elected MPs, elected MLAs will be there. No nominated person will be there. But when it comes to the impeachment, only the elected and nominated members of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha will be there. MLAs have no say when it comes to the impeachment of the President of India, even though they vote for the president's election. This takes us to the next important constitutional office in India, that is the office of the Vice President. So, the model for the Vice President of India has been borrowed from the American Constitution. Nevertheless, in India, Vice President is second highest constitutional office and it has got certain kinds of functions. However, it is not as extensive as the Vice President under the American polity. So, Vice President is the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. So, as soon as he is elected as the Vice President, he becomes automatically the chairman of Rajya Sabha. He is the ex officio chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Then he presides over all the proceedings of the Rajya Sabha. So, the Vice President, his duty is to preside over the proceedings of the Rajya Sabha. Since he is the chairman of the Rajya Sabha, that is the most obvious thing which he will do. And he acts in the event of a vacancy arising due to death, resignation, removal or otherwise of the President of India. So, when the Vice President, normally the Vice President will act as the chairman of Rajya Sabha and he will take care after the affairs of the Rajya Sabha. However, he needs to act as the President when, that is, when the office of the President remains vacant due to the death of the President, if the sitting President dies, or if the sitting President resigns, or he has been removed through the process of impeachment, or otherwise. Otherwise means if he is physically not possible for him, or he has sustained some kind of illness whereby making it impossible for him to discharge his functions. In that particular situation, the Vice President of India acts as the President of India, and as soon as he acts as the President of India, technically he gets all the powers which are vested with the President of India, and he cannot act as the Vice President at the same time. So, as I told you earlier that the Constitution mandates that there shall be a President of India. That is, in the event of the vacancy, automatically the Vice President becomes the acting President of India. This is the situation. Then, Council of Ministers. Now, one of the most crucial part or aspect of the Union Executive is the Council of Ministers. The executive is divided into two, political executive and the real executive, also known as the bureaucracy. Here the Constitution speaks about the political executive, that is the Council of Ministers. Now, Council of Ministers is one of the most powerful body in the Indian polity. So, this is where both the executive and legislative functions come to a mixture, or you can say both of them coincide. So, how? We will see now. Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers, after the general elections to the Lok Sabha, the President will invite the leader of the largest party to form the government, and that leader of the largest party will recommend the names of other persons, elected MPs, who can become the ministers upon the recommendation of that leader, who subsequently becomes the Prime Minister. So, the Council of Ministers is headed by the Prime Minister. Prime Minister, who himself is one of the ministers in the Council of Ministers, becomes the head of the Union Council of Ministers. And the Council of Ministers is appointed by the President on the advice of the PM. So, as soon as the general elections are over, the President of India calls upon the leader of the single largest party to form the government, and that leader becomes the Prime Minister, and subsequently he forwards a list of names to the President of India to be appointed as the Council of Ministers. So, therefore, Council of Ministers, even though they are appointed by the President of India, it is only upon the advice of the Prime Minister of India. That is the reason if the Prime Minister dies or if the Prime Minister resigns, the entire Council of Ministers automatically is deemed to have vacated their seats. And the Council of Ministers shall advise the President and he shall follow the advice. So, that is what we have seen. The President does not have individual discretion to exercise. So, he shall always act on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, and the Council of Ministers advice or the advice as tendered by the Council of Ministers shall be followed by the President of India. He cannot say no. He cannot say no. At the maximum, what he can do is, he can give it back or return that particular decision for the reconsideration of the Council of Ministers, and if the same decision is given, he has to follow that particular advice as given by the Council of Ministers. So, Council of Ministers, you can say, is the actual brain behind the functions of the President of India. So, without there being a Council of Ministers, the President of India cannot function. So, that is the situation, or that is the circumstance as laid down under the Indian Constitution. Then there is something called as the scheme of collective responsibility. Collective responsibility to the Lok Sabha. So, the Council of Ministers, the moment they become the Council of Ministers, they are responsible to the Lok Sabha. They are responsible to the Lok Sabha. That is, each and every action taken by the Council of Ministers must be placed before the Lok Sabha. And as long as they enjoy the support of Lok Sabha, they can continue to discharge their functions as the Council of Ministers. The moment they lose the confidence of the Lok Sabha, then there is no other option left for them but to resign. So, that is what no confidence motion is. The opposition leaders, they place a resolution before the House stating that the Council of Ministers has lost its confidence of the House. So, the charges are investigated, and if the motion has been passed by the opposition members, that is, the no confidence motion is successful, then there is no other option left for the Council of Ministers but to resign. Then stands or falls together, that is, one for all and all for one. So, the Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister has collective responsibility. Whatever decision is taken by an individual minister is deemed to be the decision of the entire Council of Ministers. That is, no person can say that, no, I am different from the Council of Ministers. So, either they stand together or they fall together. And Prime Minister is known as primus inter partes. Even though he is the Prime Minister, he is first amongst the equals. He enjoys the equal rank as the Council of Ministers. But nevertheless, he acts as a conduit, a connection between the President and the Council of Ministers. So, here we have seen that the President of India, as mandated by the Constitution, shall act according to the aid and advice as tendered by the Council of Ministers. There is no individual discretion vested with the President of India. So, Council of Ministers acts as the brain behind the President of India. So, if the President of India violates any kind of aid and advice as tendered by the Council of Ministers, then it would ultimately lead to a situation where the President will be guilty of committing violation of the Constitution, and that will open the doors for the impeachment. So, we can say that the Council of Ministers is the highest decision-making body which will influence the executive actions of the Union government. So, here we have seen that the Council of Ministers, the President of India, the Vice President of India, these three important components of the Union executive are vested with the power of implementing the policy decisions and the laws as made by the legislature from time to time. So, however weak law it may be, if the implementation or the execution is good, it is a good law, or however good law it may be, if the execution or implementation is bad, then it is no law at all. So, the sole purpose, the day-to-day functioning of the Indian polity can be traced from the Indian executive, which is very much visible to the people at large.